They left her just $1. She found out at the reading of the will. In a lawyer's office. Surrounded by people she had fed, driven to hospitals, and loved without condition for over a decade. Her name was called last. And when it was, there was nothing attached to it. No property. No account. No share of the family home she had personally kept from falling into foreclosure. Just a single line. $1. A number so small it felt less like inheritance, and more like a message. The message was, "We never considered you one of us." She sat very still. She did not cry. She did not speak. She looked down at her hands in her lap, the same hands that had signed the paperwork to save their family business 3 years ago, the same hands that had bathed her grandmother in her final months, and she made herself a quiet, unspoken promise. No one in that room knew it yet. But the woman they had just written off was the most dangerous thing a betrayed person can become: patient, prepared, and completely done asking for what she already deserved. Her name was Diane. She grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, the second of 4 children born to Robert and Gloria Caldwell, a family that had built something rare, generational wealth in a country that had spent generations trying to prevent exactly that. Robert Caldwell had started a commercial cleaning company in the late 1980s with 2 employees and 1 van. By the time Diane was in high school, it employed 40 people and held contracts with office buildings across the city. The family home was a 4-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood where the lawns were kept and the driveways held 2 cars. Not flashy, but solid. Built by hand. Built by sacrifice. Diane was not the favored child. That was Marcus, the eldest son, charismatic, loudly ambitious, the one who always sat at the right hand of their father at family dinners. Then came Diane. Then Kevin, who was funny and charming and never quite reliable. Then Simone, the youngest, who was talented and pampered in equal measure. From early on, Diane was the responsible one. Not because anyone asked her to be, but because she could see what others couldn't or wouldn't, that the business her father had built required attention, care, and someone willing to do the unglamorous work of keeping things together. She went to college on a partial scholarship, studied business administration, came home every summer to help manage accounts. While her siblings took from the family, Diane quietly gave back. When their father suffered a mild stroke at 62, it was Diane who stepped in to run day-to-day operations. She renegotiated contracts, cut unnecessary costs, digitized the company's records, and grew the client base by 30% in 2 years. She put her own career ambitions on hold. She did not ask to be compensated for what she considered family duty. Her mother, Gloria, would squeeze her hand on quiet evenings and say, "Baby, your father and I see everything you do." Everything. Diane believed her. She had no reason not to. The signs were there though, small and easy to explain away. The way Marcus would disappear into their father's study and emerge looking satisfied. The way Kevin had been given a land parcel in their father's name that Diane only learned about through a property tax notice she happened to open. The way Simone received a down payment on a condo described, casually, as a gift. Diane noticed. But she told herself, that's just how families work. My time will come. They know what I've done. They would never forget it. She was 34 years old and had spent the last 6 of those years quietly holding her family's world together. What she didn't know was that while she was doing that, someone else had been quietly taking it apart. Before we continue, please like this video and subscribe. Also tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? New York? London? Maybe anywhere in the world. We'd love to know. Robert Caldwell died on a Sunday morning in April. The grief was enormous and real. But within 72 hours of the funeral, Marcus called a family meeting, not at the family home, but at a conference room in his lawyer's downtown office. That detail alone should have told Diane everything. The will had been updated 14 months earlier. Diane had not been informed. No one had been informed, except it became clear Marcus, who had driven their father to the attorney's office himself during a period when Robert's memory was beginning to slip. The new will left the business, the family property, and the bulk of the liquid assets to Marcus as executor with sole discretionary authority. Kevin received the land parcel he had already been quietly gifted. Simone received a financial trust. Diane received the equivalent of a thank you note in dollar form, a sum that didn't cover 6 months of the salary she had never drawn for the years she had worked in the business. When she questioned it, Marcus had an answer ready. Diane had always been compensated through the business. She had benefited from access. It would be unfair to the others to give her more. Every sentence landed like something rehearsed. Because it was. Then came the part that broke something in her chest. Within weeks, a story spread through the extended family. through aunts, cousins, church members, family, friends, that Diane had been difficult during their father's illness, that she had been controlling, that she had tried to cut her siblings out of decisions, that she had always thought she was better than the rest of them. None of it was true. All of it spread like it was. And people who had watched her sacrifice her own life for that family looked at her differently now, nodded carefully, said it's complicated, and stepped back. Diane understood then that the cruelest part of this kind of betrayal isn't losing the money. It's losing the narrative. It's watching someone rewrite your entire story, and watching the people you love choose the rewrite over the truth. Marcus moved quickly once the will was settled. The business was restructured. Diane's operational role was eliminated. She was offered a part-time consulting position, her own work repackaged at a fraction of the value, and when she declined it, she was told she was making this harder than it needs to be. She left the company she had helped save. She walked out of the building on a Thursday afternoon carrying a box of personal items, past employees she had hired, past clients she had brought in, past a framed photo of her father on the reception wall that she had chosen herself. She did not look back. She moved into a small apartment across town. It was a good apartment. She had her own savings, modest but real, but it was a universe away from the life she had expected. The family Sunday dinners stopped including her. The family group chat grew quiet when she posted. Her mother, confused and grieving and in the careful grip of Marcus's influence, said things on the phone that sounded like someone else's words in her voice. At their father's church, a congregation that had known Diane since childhood, she felt eyes on her that used to hold warmth and now held something cooler. Pity maybe. Or the particular discomfort people feel around someone who has become inconvenient to care about. A deacon who had mentored her in her teens shook her hand stiffly and said, "Family matters are best kept in the family." She nodded and thanked him. She had learned in these weeks to perform composure she did not feel. At night, in her apartment, she would open her laptop and look at the business documents she had saved, contracts, financials, correspondence, and feel the weight of what had been taken from her. Not just the money. Her identity. The story of who she was and what she had done. It had been stolen and replaced with a lie, and almost everyone she loved had accepted the replacement without question. What Marcus didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Diane had saved everything. Every document. Every email. Every financial record going back 6 years. Not out of suspicion. Just out of habit. The habit of a woman who had always been the one responsible for keeping things in order. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from working hard but from being betrayed by people you worked hard for. It settles in the body differently. It doesn't feel like tiredness. It feels like gravity has increased specifically for you. Diane felt it every morning for the first 2 months. She had always been the person with a plan, the person with a next step. Now she woke up and lay in the silence of her apartment and felt nothing move inside her. She ate because eating was required. She went through the motions of job searching because job searching was logical. But the fire that had always driven her, the one that had carried her through late nights and early mornings and years of being overlooked, had gone very quiet. She called her mother one evening. Gloria answered and immediately started talking about Marcus, about how hard he was working, about the decisions he was making, about how proud Robert would have been. Diane listened for 4 minutes. Then she said goodnight and sat in her kitchen in the dark. She thought about her father. The real one, the man who had built something from nothing, who had talked to her on the porch on summer evenings about legacy and responsibility and what it meant to leave something behind. She thought about whether he had known what Marcus was planning, whether he had been too ill to resist it, whether some part of him had simply chosen the easy path, the traditional path, the sun path, and told himself it would be fine. She didn't know. She might never know. And somehow that uncertainty was the heaviest thing of all. But grief, when you sit with it long enough, eventually shows you something underneath it. And what Diane found underneath hers was not despair. It was clarity. Cold, sharp, specific clarity about exactly what had been done, and exactly what she was going to do about it. She found a therapist. Not because she was falling apart, but because she was smart enough to know that what she was carrying required more than willpower to process cleanly. The therapist, a black woman in her 50s named Dr. Reeves, with an office full of plants and a voice that held no unnecessary softness, said something in their third session that Diane wrote down and kept. "You have been performing loyalty for people who were performing love. That performance is over now. What is real begins here." She also found a lawyer. A civil attorney named Patricia Osei who specialized in estate disputes and business litigation. Diane laid out everything: the documents, the timeline, the business records, the history of her father's health. Patricia listened without interrupting. Then she said, "The question is not whether you have a case. The question is how strong you want to build it." Diane said, "Strong." Over the next several months, she rebuilt herself with the same methodical energy she had once given the family business, except this time, every ounce of it was hers. She took a director-level position at a logistics firm that had courted her the previous year. She threw herself into the work and was excellent at it, because she had always been excellent at it. She ran in the mornings. She cooked at night. She read. She rebuilt a social life that had quietly collapsed under the weight of years spent prioritizing family over friendship. And every weekend, she sat at her kitchen table with her lawyer and her files and built the case piece by piece. Not with anger. With architecture. The thing about people who underestimate you is that their underestimation becomes your advantage. Marcus had taken the business and assumed the matter was settled. He had stopped watching. That was the first mistake of many. 14 months after the will reading, Diane's attorney filed a formal legal challenge. Undue influence, lack of testamentary capacity, and breach of fiduciary duty by the executor. The undue influence argument rested on a documented timeline. Medical records showing Robert's cognitive decline in the year the will was amended, combined with pharmacy records, hospital visit logs, and testimony from two of his physicians establishing that his capacity to make complex financial decisions had been significantly compromised at the time of the amendment. The breach of fiduciary duty argument was built from Diane's business records. As executor, Marcus had made several post-death financial decisions that were not in the estate's interest. They were in his own. Transfers. Reclassifications. A salary he had awarded himself retroactively. Diane had documented all of it because she had always documented everything. She hadn't done it to build a case. She had done it because she was the kind of person who kept records. Now those records were a weapon. There was also a letter. Tucked in the back of a business ledger she had kept at home. A handwritten note from her father, dated 3 years before his death, in which he described his intentions for the company clearly: equal shares to all 4 children, with provisions for the one who had kept this family's foundation solid. He had meant her. He had written her name. Diane had found it while going through old files 3 weeks after the will reading. She had sat on her kitchen floor and held it for a long time. Then she had put it in a sealed envelope and handed it to Patricia. Marcus had built his case on the assumption that Diane had nothing. That she was emotional, isolated, outmaneuvered. He had forgotten one fundamental truth about the person who keeps the records. She always knows where everything is. 3 months after the suit was filed, 2 things happened in quick succession. First, Kevin called Diane. Not Marcus, Kevin. The younger brother who had stayed quiet through everything, who had accepted his land parcel and kept his head down. He called on a Tuesday evening and his voice was different. Quieter. He said he had heard about the lawsuit. He said he needed to talk. Diane listened carefully and said very little. When the call ended, she called Patricia immediately. Second, a former employee of the family business, a long-serving operations manager named Delroy who had been quietly let go by Marcus 6 months after taking control, reached out through LinkedIn. He had seen a local business publication mention the estate dispute in passing. He had information. Specifically, he had documented evidence of financial decisions Marcus had made in the company's first months under his control that had redirected significant funds in ways that did not appear in the estate's official accounting. These were not coincidences. They were the natural consequence of someone running a corrupt operation beginning to feel the edges of it. When people start to feel legal exposure, they look for the nearest exit. And often, the nearest exit involves someone they wronged who is willing to tell the truth. Diane met with both of them separately. She was measured, professional, and gave nothing away. She took their information back to Patricia. She asked what this changed. Patricia looked at the new materials for a long moment and said, "It changes everything." Diane nodded. She had learned, in the long months of building this case, that the truth doesn't disappear when you bury it. Just waits. And it is always patient for longer than the people trying to hide it. By the time the case reached mediation, 2 years after the will reading, Diane was not the same woman who had sat in that lawyer's office holding her silence. She had been promoted at the logistics firm. She had built a professional reputation entirely separate from the Caldwell name, one that was hers alone, built on her own record. She had reconnected with friends, rebuilt her confidence, and in doing so, had rediscovered something she hadn't realized the years of family sacrifice had slowly cost her: a sense of her own life as something that belonged to her. She was also privately at peace in a way she hadn't expected. Not because justice had been delivered yet, it hadn't. But because she had stopped needing people to acknowledge what had been done to her. The documents acknowledged it. The evidence acknowledged it. The law, she was learning, is one of the few systems in the world that does not care about who is louder or more charming or more beloved at family dinners. It cares about documentation. And Diane had documentation. The case was solid. Undue influence, substantiated by medical records and physician testimony. Breach of fiduciary duty, evidenced by financial records and Delroy's corroborating documentation. The handwritten letter from Robert Caldwell, authenticated by a forensic document examiner, establishing his true intent in his own words. Kevin had agreed to provide a formal statement. He would not testify against his brother loudly. But he would not lie under oath either. And sometimes, silence in the right direction is its own kind of truth. Marcus had hired an expensive attorney and a confident posture. But confidence built on a lie has a specific weakness. It requires the lie to hold. And this one was already coming apart at every seam. The mediation session was held in a neutral office in Midtown Atlanta. All parties present. Both legal teams. A court-appointed mediator. And Diane, in a dark blazer, a legal pad, and the particular stillness of someone who has already decided what they are willing to accept and what they are not. Marcus walked in looking like a man who expected to negotiate. He was polished. Controlled. He had done this before. Managed rooms, managed narratives, managed people. He glanced at Diane when he sat down across the table. She met his eyes and nodded once, the way you nod at someone you used to know. Then Patricia began to lay out the evidence. Document by document. Timeline entry by timeline entry. Financial discrepancy by financial discrepancy. The handwritten letter last. The room changed somewhere around the third exhibit. Marcus's attorney leaned over and whispered something to him. Marcus's expression did not break. He was too practiced for that. But something behind his eyes shifted. A recalculation. A realization. The room he had walked into expecting to manage had already been arranged around him. Diane watched it happen and felt nothing dramatic. No triumph, no rage. Just a quiet, settling confirmation of something she had known for 2 years. The truth, given enough time in the right hands, always finds its way into the room. The mediation lasted 2 days. By the end of the first day, Marcus's attorney had requested a private session. By the morning of the second, they were no longer arguing whether the will had been improperly influenced. They were arguing about the terms of the settlement. That shift was everything. When the other side stops defending the act and starts negotiating the consequence, the battle is already over. The settlement was substantial. Diane received her rightful share of the estate, the portion her father had always intended for her, as documented in his own handwriting. She also received compensation for the years of undrawn salary from the business, calculated against market rates for the operational role she had performed. The financial irregularities Marcus had committed as executor were referred to the state attorney's office for review. His authority over the estate was formally revoked and a neutral third-party administrator was appointed. Kevin, through his attorney, acknowledged what he had witnessed. Simone said very little but signed what she was asked to sign. Their mother, Gloria, was not directly involved, but she was present at the family dinner 2 weeks later when Diane quietly placed a copy of her father's handwritten letter on the table and asked everyone to read it. The real one. Robert's words. His actual intention. His actual love for his actual daughter, written in his own hand. Gloria read it twice. Then she looked at Diane for a long time without speaking. Then she said, "Baby, I am so sorry." Not because anyone had told her to. Because she finally understood. Justice, Diane was learning, does not always arrive loud. Sometimes it arrives exactly like this, quietly across a dinner table, in the form of a letter a good man wrote before anyone knew how much it would matter. The estate was redistributed according to Robert Caldwell's true wishes. The business was restructured under neutral management, with all 4 siblings holding equal equity stakes and none with unilateral control. Marcus retained his share. The law does not require people to be stripped of everything, only of what was not theirs to take. But his authority was gone. His narrative was gone. The version of the story in which Diane was the villain could no longer survive contact with the documented truth. He did not apologize. Some people never do. But he stopped talking about her entirely, which was, in its own way, a kind of concession. Diane did not gloat. She did not make announcements. She called Dr. Reeves and said, "It's done." She took a long weekend. She visited her father's grave alone on a Saturday morning, and stood there for a while without saying anything out loud, just thinking about the man he had been before illness and manipulation had narrowed his final decisions into something smaller than his real heart. She forgave him privately. Not because what happened was acceptable, but because she understood that carrying his failure inside her own chest was a weight she no longer needed. The family began, slowly and awkwardly, to find its way back toward her. She let some of them in. Others she simply observed from a careful distance. She had learned, finally, the difference between family who loves you and family who needs you, and she would never confuse the two again. There is a kind of person in every family, in every culture, in every city, on every continent, who does the quiet work, who holds things together, who sacrifices without announcement and loves without condition and trusts that the people around them are keeping a record of it, even when no one says a word. This story is for them.